Hey everyone, Life Coach Carisa here. Welcome back to my channel. This month I'm talking about owning your story and why your past doesn't define you. And I'm so excited to be with you today because this topic is incredibly close to my heart and it's really at the core of everything I do and everything that I talk about here. It's easy to look back at our lives and feel like the experiences we've had, the things that were said to us, the way we grew up, and that they somehow cemented who we are, that they wrote our story for us. And maybe, just maybe, that story feels a little less like an epic adventure and more like a heavy burden that we can't put down. But what if I told you that your past doesn't have to be your permanent address? What if you could understand why certain patterns show up and then actually rewrite the narrative of your life to one that you are motivated by, not weighted down by? And that's what I'm talking about today. A big piece of this, a really foundational concept, is understanding inherited programming. When I talk about inherited programming in simple terms, I mean the beliefs, the behaviors, and the emotional patterns that we unconsciously pick up starting way back in childhood through our teenage years and continuing into early adulthood. I mean, think about it. A brand new baby doesn't know any of these things. They aren't born with a script. They learn through their experiences and their exposures. And that's really how it happens. These programs are shaped by so many things. It's the experiences we had, the events that taught us how to navigate the world, often reinforcing certain responses. It's the exposures, the repeated times we observed how the people closest to us behaved and reacted, even when they weren't directly teaching us anything. It's the expectations, both the ones that were clearly stated, like you should always do this, and the ones that were just understood pressures to conform. It's the reinforcement by routine, the habits we form just by living the same daily life, having the same interactions over and over. It's emotional bonding, internalizing the emotions and reactions of those that we were closest to. It's indirect communication, learning through the nonverbal cues, the tone of voice, or these unspoken family rules rather than direct instruction. And number seven, it's simply a lack of alternative perspectives. Growing up without seeing different ways of thinking, behaving, or living. So the way you saw things was just the way things are. I can share a simple personal example of this. Growing up, I routinely saw my father drinking alcohol. It was just a common thing to see him come home from work and have a drink, anything from a Miller High Life beer to whiskey mixed with his Mountain Dew. It was just there. I even accidentally drank that mixed Mountain Dew once by mistake because it was in the refrigerator when I was little, and I thought it was just regular pop. Now, I didn't immediately become anything close to an alcoholic, not at all. But later in my life, when I started facing really difficult times, especially with my teenage son, I did find myself turning to alcohol. It became a buffer. And I thought it would help me be a happier mom, a calmer mom, a less anxious, less stressed out mom. And I think that being exposed to that substance use so routinely growing up definitely opened a door for me in my own life to potentially rely upon it. It's not that exposure causes a specific outcome 100% of the time for everyone, but based on my experiences, seeing that pattern did create a pathway in my own behavior later on when I faced challenges. And so these programs, these patterns shaped by our past, they often run beneath the surface. We don't consciously choose them, but they can drive so many of our adult traits. Things like people pleasing, perfectionism, avoidance, controlling tendencies, fear, procrastination. The list goes on, right? And we find ourselves stuck doing things we don't want to do, having reactions we don't understand. We think, why am I like this? And that leads to why understanding this is so important, because we are wired in many ways to not want to look at the parts of ourselves we judge as not so good. We try to keep them hidden. I don't want to know why I'm like this. We push them away, but they still influence us every single day. And learning just a little bit about how our incredible brain works is so empowering. So often we think there's something fundamentally wrong with us, or why am I like this? But it's actually totally normal because parts of our brain were designed for a purpose, often to keep us safe. Like, think about your basal ganglia. It loves habits. It's designed to make routine behaviors automatic so that you don't have to think about them. And that's great for tying your shoes, but it also makes those unhealthy patterns feel automatic, like they are just who you are. And if we don't understand how these parts of our brain function, how they create habits, how they link memories and emotions, we can feel like we're just succumbing to these patterns in our everyday lives and the challenges we face. But understanding them helps us see that it's not a character flaw. It's often just our brain doing what it was programmed to do based on our history. And here's the most hopeful part, the part I really want you to hear. Inherited programming is not a life sentence. It might feel like it sometimes. It might feel like destiny, like, well, this is just who I am because of how I grew up. But that simply isn't true. What gives us the incredible ability to change, to actually rewrite our story and take back control. It's the amazing way our brains are designed. It's called neuroplasticity. Our brains are constantly forming new connections, overriding old ones, and evolving. We are literally capable of rewiring our own brains. But here's the key. If all we're feeding our brain is the old stories, the old unhelpful exposures, the old programming, we won't grow and evolve in the ways we desire. We have to consciously feed it new information, new possibilities, new ways of thinking of being. And this is what a coach did for me. While I couldn't see the new possibilities yet, they held space for them and they lent me their belief and experience. So if our past doesn't define us and we can rewrite our story, how do we actually do it? I try to share a simple framework I call the 4 R's to think about the path forward. First, you recognize what's no longer serving you. This is about building awareness, becoming fully aware of your thoughts, your beliefs, your habits, your behaviors, and seeing which ones are detrimental to your well-being. I often call this where's the friction in your life? And it does require you to be mindful and honest and have introspection. And a simple way to start building this, a crucial awareness, is to just look for those areas of friction in your life. Where do you feel stuck? Where do you feel drained? Maybe it's a recurring issue in a relationship with your spouse, your child, a coworker. Maybe it's never having time to take care of yourself, or that constant feeling of being overwhelmed. Look for those spots where you feel uncomfortable, where things just aren't working. Then, instead of reacting, you want to pause and ask, what is actually happening here that is making me feel this way? What thoughts are running through my head? Just start writing about it. I notice this happening, and this is how I feel every time. I see a pattern here. It happens again and again. That is how you take the first step of noticing what's really going on. It's about coming into conscious awareness and not just being on autopilot. Next, you reframe what aligns with your true inner self. This is about shifting your perspective, changing your internal dialogue to align with who you authentically are. Not the old programming. Instead of being held back by limiting beliefs, you start focusing on your progress, your strengths, your possibilities. The best way to practice reframing, notice those words, those sentences that float around in your head, often unconsciously, the I'm not good enoughs, the I always mess this ups, the I have to people pleases. Notice them and then ask yourself, how does this thinking, this sentence make me feel? How does it make me act? And then the most powerful question, what would be something else I could think instead? Something that would make me feel better and could also be true. I remember when I always thought I'm not a good enough mother. It made me feel horrible, terrible. I would show up in very controlling, overwhelmed ways. But when I consciously chose to think instead, I did the best I knew how at the time. It created such a different energy in me, a calmer, more spacious place where I could have compassion for myself. And reframing is about consciously changing those crucial sentences in our head. Then, steps 3 and 4, you need to retrain your brain and repeat the new program until it becomes habitual. That's where you build mastery. Retraining is about creating new neural pathways through practice, and your brain learns through repetition. So every time you act on a newly formed thought, you literally are building new beliefs. And consistent practice is how your brain creates lasting change. So mastery in any area, mental, emotional, physical, it comes from showing up daily, even when it feels hard. Now, consistency can feel overwhelming, I know, but I would encourage you first to not tell yourself that it's hard. Just tell yourself it's not as hard as I think. Honestly, some things transformed very quickly for me when I focused on them, maybe just weeks or a month to change a key sentence in my head. And things that I was more emotionally tied to did take longer, yes, but you start by simply deciding it's not as hard as you think. And then you just get to work on retraining your brain in these new ways. So take advantage of these simple techniques. Use sticky notes, with your new thoughts, set phone reminders, create visual reminders to constantly reinforce these new sentences and thoughts in your brain. Repetition isn't frustrating when you see it as empowering your brain to create the change that you ultimately want. The entire process of actively uncovering and working with inherited programming is how you step out of that victim mentality. I mentioned, and truly take ownership about this, right? I want you to step out of victim mentality and own your path forward, right? Because the truth is those things happened. The exposures you had, the experiences you went through, in many cases, they aren't happening to you today. I get very emotional about this because I think of the grip that it had on me. They happened years and years ago. But we are still experiencing everyday suffering because of them, still living from that old script. And this is where you have that powerful choice. Okay, these things happened to me. These things were said to me. These things were exposed to me. But now, what do I want to do about it as a grown adult? Because, for example, for so many years, I felt like a victim to a father who was emotionally absent and could be a bit of a Jekyll and Hyde. I had a powerful memory of fighting with him. And he would have this grin show up on his face, and I could never understand it. How could someone who was so mad at me be smiling? And you know what? Years later, I was arguing with my teenage son, and he said, "Why are you smiling?" And I immediately became defensive, and I said I wasn't. But the truth is, I recognized I was smiling. And this was something I was exposed to, something I hated seeing. And now here I was doing it also to my son. So for years, I carried the victim story. My dad was this way and it messed me up. But once I owned it and said, okay, my dad was this way. I was not born this way. I picked up these traits and inherited programming from him, but I get to choose how I move forward. And I stopped looking at that situation through the lens of being a victim. I looked at it as my work to do on myself, to evolve and change, and which is exactly what I did. And that is taking ownership. So beyond the 4 R's framework, rewriting your story and taking back control in the everyday, like challenging the way you think about everything and the way you act, it's slowly but surely you will get better at catching those old patterns in the moment and consciously deciding how you want to show up instead. You move from just reacting impulsively to old programming to being very intentional and aware of how you are showing up and realigning that with who you authentically are. It's very much about establishing very healthy and a loving relationship with yourself. Because I think as we go through life's difficulties, we become disconnected from ourselves and altered. We need to get back to who we authentically are, because when we are connected to that core self, we will show up in our zone of genius and truly be a light in the world. I've clearly been on this journey myself, and it hasn't always been easy. One of the hardest parts for me personally was changing the patterns that were so deeply ingrained, the ones that felt like they had tangible evidence behind them. where I felt completely justified in my negative self-belief. The belief that I wasn't a great mother, for example, that one was the last to go in my journey of transformation because I had felt like I had conclusive evidence that no one could argue with. But the truth is, I was doing the best I could with the programming that I had, repeating things that were familiar, even if they could be termed as dysfunctional. And what I noticed is that I started showing up more like my true authentic self. It felt so darn good. And that feeling became the momentum I needed to keep myself moving forward, even when it was hard. This entire topic, owning your story and understanding the programming that shapes us and the incredible possibility of change at any age, is so central to my work and my own journey. And it's the heart of my upcoming book, Why Am I Like This? Uncovering Inherited Programming and Navigating Generational Trauma. I'm in the proof stages right now. I wrote Why Am I Like This to be a part roadmap and a part cautionary tale of what happens when you are not in tune with the programming you received as a child. And too often we find ourselves in middle age feeling unfulfilled and disappointed, asking, why am I like this? And I want people to know that no matter how old you are, you have the ability to recognize where it is you came from and choose what feels true to you today. And so in the book, I share a roadmap of what it took me to face the darkness in my own life and find the strength to keep moving forward, overcoming many of these deeply ingrained habits and traits. And I've changed so much about the way that I live my everyday life. And now I experience a feeling of peace and calm daily, even though I'm facing many challenges routinely. The way that I have found the strength and emotional resilience and bandwidth to handle it now is far from how I used to cope. But here's what I want everyone to know. This level of peace, resilience, and the ability to rewrite your story is something that is available to you too. There's nothing inherently special about me other than I made a choice to recognize these patterns, own them, and take responsibility for changing them. That journey, identifying my inherited beliefs, challenging old narratives, rewriting my inner script, and stepping into clarity and confidence, is the roadmap that you'll find in my book, Why Am I Like This? It's about reclaiming your future and breaking free from autopilot behaviors to create a life so fulfilling that like you literally have to pinch yourself to believe it's real. That's how I feel daily. So my book will be released on June 4th, and you'll be able to find it on Amazon in both hardcover, paperback, and an ebook format. And I also plan to have an audiobook available in the future. And I have to tell you, I am so excited to get this book into your hands. If anything we talked about today resonated with you, I encourage you to start with that first step, recognize. Just begin noticing the patterns, the thoughts, the feelings that aren't serving you. It's the beginning of reclaiming your power. You can rewrite your story. Now, you can always find more resources and information on my website. If you want to be kept in the loop for my book, Why Am I Like This, coming in June, you can head over to my website, lifecoachingwithcarissa.com, and click on my book and share your email address with me, and I'll make sure you receive updates on launch events and giveaways. All right, my friends, that is what I have for you today. If this message resonated with you, please share it with someone who might need to hear it. And if you find that you're ready to break through and discover the effects of your own inherited programming and finding a way forward, I would love to support you. So sign up for a free clarity call on my website. I know this one was a little bit longer today, but like I said, this is the foundation of so much of the work that I do with my clients. So thank you for being here. Remember your own story, because your past does not define who you are meant to be. And I will see you in the next video. Have a great day.